You're joining us in the 74th edition of Worldview from Islamabad, coming to you from the headquarters of PTV Network, right here in the Pakistani capital. Over the weekend, I was shocked, like scores of Pakistanis across the country, on hearing the news of the abduction of 9 Chinese citizens, ordinary citizens, in the heart of the Pakistani capital. The shocker here was that Islamabad, the Pakistani capital, would be the last place on earth you'd expect ordinary Chinese to get this kind of treatment. And to further add to my shock was to watch the international news channels. This story was topping the hourly news bulletins in almost all the international news networks. And immediately my mind went to my friends, and I'm sure many ordinary Pakistanis have Chinese friends living in various Pakistani cities, and many of us who have happened to visit China have friends over there. And I was thinking, what would our Chinese friends would be thinking hearing this story? I mean, here's a country, a close friend, a close ally, and suddenly, we hear this news item, 9 ordinary Chinese people, some of them working in a parlor in Islamabad, kidnapped on charges of, running a brothel or a prostitution ring, according to the people who kidnapped these 9 Chinese. And I'm sure this would be confusing for people who are sitting outside Pakistan listening to this story. I mean, what's going on after all? And how could this happen? And how could an administration of a religious seminary, the Lal Masjid, the people who kidnapped these 9 Chinese, how could they do it, by themselves and outside the parameters, outside the power of the state authority? So let's try to understand in this edition, really, what's behind this story. The religious undercurrents. It's a confusing story. People tend to club together various strains within this story into one. And in this edition, we'll try to understand. And I have somebody here with me in the studio who has been studying very closely the religious movements in Pakistan and beyond in the broader Middle East region. Zaid Hamid, who's the founding consultant of the BrassTacks, which is the security and defense think tank based here in Rawalpindi. Thank you very much, Zaid, for joining us again.
Thank you
now,
very much.
I'm sure it's a very confusing thing, and I think this is an apt time, really, to try to understand, and I'm sure you share this feeling with me. We need to understand really what's going on, because somebody sitting outside the country would say, oh my God, so are these the Muslims? I mean, this is a mosque, right? So this means, and all Pakistanis are Muslims, so does this mean that all Pakistanis approve of these kind of actions? And if some do and some not, why this confusion? So let's begin with this thing, the 9 Chinese kidnapped by these people. Now, is this part of some, religious mission? I mean, how do you explain what happened?
Ahmed, you have to look at this issue in a larger context. You have to understand that whatever is happening in Islamabad is not in isolation here. Now, let us go back slightly. You must be knowing that for quite some time, for the last couple of years particularly, Chinese are being targeted in this entire region in various places. Let's start from Afghanistan, for example. Kunduz is an area which is controlled by Northern Alliance. They are allied with the Americans and allied with the Karzai government, obviously. There. Chinese were killed in Kunduz as well.
And these were engineers.
These were engineers working. Then you have an incident of Chinese being kidnapped in Waziristan as well. And the man who kidnapped those Chinese, Abdullah Mahsoud, the man was supposedly in Guantanamo Bay. He was kept there by the Americans. He comes back, and first thing he does, he kidnaps Chinese. Am I missing something here? Now, then Chinese were also killed in Balochistan Liberation Army's controlled Gwadar, and they were also attacked in BLA's controlled hub in Balochistan. And now we have this 5th incident of Chinese being kidnapped in Islamabad. Now, I don't think Chinese are being targeted here in isolation. There is definitely somebody in this region who wants Chinese out. And they are using various assets, whether they are in religious groups or in sub-nationalist separatist militant terrorist groups or in local clerics. The assets definitely which are being used here are being used by some external.
But this is, Hamid, what I don't understand, and I need you to explain to me, and I'm sure to the viewers. You mentioned the BLA, for example. Now, I know, I'm sure the viewers would know, part of the history of this group. It used to be financed and organized by the former Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and somehow some people in Afghanistan are also involved even now in supporting this organization. It does not have a mass appeal, but it certainly has
it's a militant group.
Yeah, you could, exactly, in Afghanistan. It has a base in Afghanistan. We know that for sure. Now, the question is, the Lal Masjid thing, these are people running the administration of the Lal Masjid in the heart of Islamabad, this religious seminary, are people basically who ascribe, who say that we support, we sympathize with the ideology of the Taliban. How could they be targeting the Chinese?
The Lal Masjid people are an isolated lot in the country. You don't find support for them in any mainstream religious group. Similarly, whatever Abdullah Masood did in Waziristan was not condoned by any militant group in country. The religious groups in Pakistan do not attack Chinese. Let me make it very clear to you. Chinese are taken as friends by them. Nowhere you will find religious groups attacking Chinese. And so a man who was supposedly in Guantanamo Bay, he comes back and kidnaps and kills Chinese, then definitely he is not working for the mainstream religious groups here. Religious groups here are also penetrated, just like the subnationalist groups who are being used by the foreign powers. There are many axes of religious groups here. There's not just one group. We will explain to this later.
Yeah, we'll see. Tell me one more thing, Zaid, about this Lal Masjid administration thing before we move on. I mean, these people, have they really crossed a line now as far as the state of Pakistan is concerned?
Yes, I think they have. I mean, every opportunity was given to them to come back to terms, to talk decently, to come within the limits of decency, within the limits of law. There are ways to disagree with the state policy. There are ways to disagree with what's happening in the society if you don't like it. You see, what happens is, you may be saying so many good things, but if you are practicing what is against the ambit of law, outside the ambit of law, against the morality of faith itself, then definitely that creates doubts whether whom you're working for. So definitely they're not idiots. They know what is right and wrong. They know what are the limits of law. They know what are the limits of morality. Why are other religious groups not supporting them in this? So definitely, I have no doubt that they have crossed the limits this time. And they're working on an agenda which is neither religious, neither nationalistic, neither supportive to Pakistan's ideology.
Okay, this takes me now to my next question, and we get into the wider subject now. This is a religious group, a small, you mentioned them, I mean, you said they're isolated, the Lal Masjid people. Okay. Now, to understand, it's very confusing for most people outside the country, even for people inside the country, for people like me. For example, just a few weeks back, we had, we know that the area between Pakistan and Afghanistan is very porous. And we know that there's Al-Qaeda movement there, maybe Taliban, religious extremists, others. And recently, just a few weeks back, we heard that there was an infighting between Al-Qaeda people themselves, or sympathizers, in Waziristan. And it turned out that those two parties, whom we, the outsiders, described as Al-Qaeda, were basically consisted of